I never thought a garden gnome would almost cost me my home. But when Barbara decided my lawn decorations violated HOA rules that didn't exist, she started a war she couldn't win. Because unlike her, I had evidence. And boy, did I use it. My name is Karen Mitchell, and I've lived in Meadowbrook Heights for 8 years. When my husband David and I bought our 3-bedroom colonial back in March of 2016, this neighborhood felt like a dream come true. Tree-lined streets, friendly neighbors, and a community pool we actually used. Sure, we had an HOA, but the previous president, Margaret Chun, was reasonable. She enforced actual rules and left people alone otherwise. Then Margaret retired to Florida in January of 2024, and Barbara Hendricks took over. Barbara lived in the largest house on Sycamore Drive, a 5,000-square-foot McMansion that looked like it belonged in a different zip code. She had perfectly manicured lawns, professionally maintained landscaping, and apparently nothing better to do than police everyone else's property. Within her first month as HOA president, she'd sent violation notices to 12 families. Garbage cans visible from the street, cars parked in driveways overnight, a child's basketball hoop that was, according to Barbara, an eyesore. But she saved her special attention for me. It started in April of 2024 when I decided to add some personality to my front yard. Nothing crazy. I installed a small flower garden along the walkway, added a bird bath, and yes, placed a collection of 7 garden gnomes throughout the landscaping. They were adorable, hand-painted ceramic gnomes I'd collected over the years. One read a book, another pushed a wheelbarrow, and my favorite wore a tiny fishing hat and held a miniature rod. David thought they were charming. Our 10-year-old daughter Emma loved them and named each one. Our immediate neighbors, the Johnsons and the Patel family, complimented the whimsical touch. Even the mailman told me they made him smile. Barbara saw them on a Tuesday morning during one of her neighborhood inspections. I was watering my when her white Lexus SUV pulled up to my curb. She emerged wearing a cream pantsuit and oversized sunglasses, carrying her ever-present tablet. "Karen," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "we need to talk about your recent landscaping changes." I set down my watering can. "Good morning, Barbara. What about them?" She gestured broadly at my yard. "These decorations. They're not in compliance with our community standards." I blinked. "Which standard specifically?" Barbara tapped on her tablet. Section 7. Subsection C clearly states that all exterior decorations must maintain the aesthetic harmony of the neighborhood. "Could you show me that section?" I asked. I don't remember reading anything about lawn ornaments in the HOA documents. Her jaw tightened slightly. "It's implied in the general aesthetics clause." "Implied isn't the same as written?" I replied calmly. "And these gnomes aren't offensive or inappropriate. They're just garden decorations." Barbara removed her sunglasses, and I saw the cold determination in her eyes. "I'm giving you 72 hours to remove them. After that, you'll receive a formal violation and a fine of $50 per day until compliance is achieved." "You can't fine me for something that's not against the actual rules," I said, feeling my blood pressure rise. She smiled tightly. "As HOA president, I have the authority to interpret our covenants. 72 hours, Karen. Don't make this difficult." She climbed back into her Lexus and drove away, leaving me standing in my yard, stunned and angry. That evening, I pulled out every HOA document we'd received over the years. David and I spent 3 hours reading through the covenants, bylaws, and architectural guidelines. Nowhere, and I mean nowhere, was there any mention of garden decorations, lawn ornaments, or anything that could reasonably be interpreted as prohibiting my gnomes. "She's making this up," David said, rubbing his temples. "She doesn't like them, so she's inventing rules." "Can she do that?" Emma asked from the doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. "No, sweetie," I assured her. "She can't, but I wasn't entirely sure." Barbara seemed to wield her HOA presidency like a weapon, and I'd heard stories about other homeowners who'd fought back and lost, either giving up or spending thousands on lawyers. The next morning, I did something that would change everything. I went to Best Buy and purchased a small outdoor security camera system, not the fancy kind that costs thousands. Just a decent 4-camera setup for $399 that connected to my phone. I installed 2 cameras on my front porch, covering my yard and the street, and 2 in the back, covering my patio and back entrance. "What's all this for?" David asked, watching me mount the last camera. "Documentation," I said. "If Barbara wants to play games, I'm going to have proof of everything that happens." I didn't know then how crucial that decision would be. On day 3, exactly 72 hours after Barbara's ultimatum, she returned. This time, she brought 2 other people, a thin man in his 60s carrying a clipboard and a younger woman in a business suit. I met them at my front door. "Can I help you?" Barbara gestured to her companions. "This is Gerald Thompson, our HOA attorney, and Jennifer Martinez, our community manager. We're here to discuss your continued violation." "There is no violation," Primera Said firmly. "I've reviewed every document, and there's nothing prohibiting garden decorations." Gerald cleared his throat. "Mrs. Mitchell, the Aesthetic Harmony Clause in Section 7 gives the HOA board broad authority to regulate exterior appearances. Show me where it specifically mentions lawn ornaments." I challenged. Jennifer stepped forward. "Perhaps we can reach a compromise. What if you reduce the number of decorations to, say, 2 or 3? I almost laughed. "Compromise? You're asking me to remove property from my own yard based on rules that don't exist." "That's not a compromise. That's bullying." Barbara's face flushed. She raised one hand dramatically. "This is exactly the kind of obstinate attitude that damages our community. You think you're special? That rules don't apply to you?" "I think actual written rules should apply equally to everyone," I countered, "and I'm not seeing any rules being broken here." "Fine," Barbara snapped. "As of today, you're officially in violation. That's $50 per day. We'll also be exploring other options to ensure compliance." "What other options?" David asked, appearing beside me. Barbara's smile turned predatory. "We have methods of dealing with homeowners who refuse to cooperate. You'll see." They walked back to Barbara's Lexus, and I noticed she said something to Gerald that made him nod seriously. My stomach knotted with anxiety. That night, I received an email from the HOA's official address. It was a formal violation notice, complete with threatening language about escalating fines, legal action, and potential foreclosure procedures if I didn't comply within 30 days. "Foreclosure over garden gnomes. They can't actually take our house," David said, but he sounded uncertain. "Can they?" I grabbed my phone and started calling every real estate attorney in town. Most were too expensive or too busy. Finally, I found Robert Chun, Margaret's nephew, who'd just started his own practice. When I explained the situation, he laughed. "My aunt warned me about Barbara," he said. "She's been threatening homeowners left and right, hoping they'll fold without checking the actual rules. But here's the thing. HOAs can't enforce rules that don't exist. And they definitely can't foreclose over decorations unless there's a clear, written prohibition that was violated." "So what do I do?" I asked. "Document everything," Robert advised. "Save every email, every letter, every interaction. If she keeps pushing, we'll have grounds for harassment. But it'll cost you. I charge $150 per hour, and if this goes to court, you're looking at several $1,000s minimum." Money we didn't really have. David's construction business had been slow lately, and my job as a dental hygienist paid the bills but left little extra. "Let me think about it." Primera told Robert. To next week things escalated. On Monday, I found a notice on my door claiming I'd violated overnight parking rules by leaving our sedan in the driveway. Our driveway, where we'd always parked. The notice demanded a $100 fine. On Wednesday, Barbara's community manager, Jennifer, sent an email stating that my flower garden extended 3 inches beyond the approved planting zone and needed to be reduced. another $100 fine. On Friday, I received a notice about my mailbox being the wrong shade of black. The mailbox I'd installed 6 years ago, before Barbara was president. Another $100 fine. She was stacking violations, trying to bury me in fines, and force me to either pay thousands of dollars or remove the gnomes in defeat. But she made one critical mistake. That Friday evening, I was reviewing the security camera footage from the week, and I noticed something strange. On Wednesday afternoon, while I was at work and David was on a job site, Barbara had visited my house, but she hadn't knocked or left a notice on the door. Instead, I watched her walk up to my flower garden with a measuring tape, take some measurements, then move one of my garden gnomes slightly forward, pushing it just past the edge of the garden bed into the grass. Then she took photographs. I replayed it 3 times, my heart pounding. She had deliberately moved my decoration to make it look like it extended beyond my landscaping, then used that as evidence of a violation. David's primera lit out. You need to see this. We watched the footage together. His face grew red with anger. She's framing you. She's literally creating violations. I checked the other day's footage. On Monday night, after we'd gone to bed, Barbara had returned around 11 p.m. She'd actually taken photographs of our car in the driveway, positioning herself to make it look like the car extended beyond our property line when it clearly didn't. She's not just interpreting rules loosely, primera Saeed slowly. She's manufacturing evidence. The next morning, Saturday, I was in my front yard pruning roses when Barbara drove by slowly. She saw me, smiled, and actually waved. Then she raised her hand in a mock salute, as if she'd already won. That's when I knew I had to fight back. On Monday morning, I marched into Robert Chune's office with my laptop. I need to hire you, I announced. And you need to see these videos. Robert watched the footage, his expression growing more serious with each clip. This is gold, Karen. This is HOA board misconduct, fraud, and possible harassment. With this evidence, we can not only get your fines dismissed, but we might be able to remove Barbara from the board entirely. How much will it cost? I asked. For this, I'll do it for a flat fee of $2,000. But I think we can recover that in damages if we play this right. $2,000 we didn't really have, but I thought about Barbara's smug face, her deliberate harassment, and her assumption that she could bully me into submission. Do it, I said. Robert drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon, including still frames from my security footage. We sent it certified mail to Barbara, with copies to every member of the HOA board, and copied the community manager Jennifer Martinez. I expected a response, maybe anger, maybe denial, maybe even an apology. I did not expect what actually happened. The next day, Tuesday afternoon, I returned from work to find Emma sitting on the front steps, crying. David's truck was in the driveway, and he was pacing the front yard, phone pressed to his ear, his face red with fury. What happened? I asked, rushing to Emma. Mom, she sobbed. Someone hurt the gnomes. I looked at my carefully arranged garden decorations. Every single gnome had been destroyed, not just knocked over, but systematically smashed with something heavy. Ceramic shards covered my flower beds. The fishing gnome's head lay in the grass, separated from its body. The reading gnome was pulverized into dust. 8 years of collecting, gone. Emma's carefully named friends, destroyed. But worse than the vandalism was what I found tucked under the largest piece of broken ceramic, a printed note in Barbara's distinctive handwriting. Non-compliance has consequences. David hung up his phone. Police are on their way. And you need to check the camera footage. My hands shook as I pulled up the app on my phone. The timestamp showed 2:45 p.m., just 30 minutes earlier. A car pulled up to my curb, not Barbara's Lexus. A silver Honda Accord I didn't recognize. But the woman who got out was definitely Barbara. She'd worn a baseball cap and sunglasses, probably thinking she was being clever. But I had a clear view of her face as she looked directly at my security camera, smiled widely, and raised both hands in a triumphant gesture before pulling a hammer from her large purse. Then, methodically and deliberately, she walked through my garden and destroyed every single gnome while staring straight at the camera. She wasn't trying to hide. She wanted me to know it was her. When she finished, she pulled out the note and placed it in the wreckage. Then she looked at the camera one more time, laughed, and drove away. "She's insane," David whispered. "She doesn't even care that you have cameras." But I understood. Barbara thought she was untouchable. She thought her position as HOA president gave her unlimited power. She thought she could do whatever she wanted, and no one could stop her. She was wrong. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, I showed them everything: the original violations, the fake measurements, the moved decorations, and finally, the vandalism footage. Officer Rodriguez watched the videos twice. "Ma'am, this is clear evidence of vandalism and harassment. We'll file charges immediately." "Will she be arrested?" I asked. He hesitated. "It depends. She'll be charged, and she'll have to answer for this. But judges sometimes go easy on first-time offenders, especially if they have good lawyers." "She has the HOA's lawyer," I said bitterly. "Then you might want to consider a restraining order," Officer Rodriguez suggested. "This kind of behavior can escalate." After the police left, I sat on my front steps with David and Emma, staring at the wreckage of my garden decorations. I'd started this fight over principle, refusing to be bullied over non-existent rules. Now Barbara had destroyed property, committed vandalism, and left threatening notes. I pulled out my phone and called Robert Chun. "We need to escalate this." "Now, I'm already drafting an emergency motion," Robert said. I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "Karen, with this footage, we're not just fighting HOA violations anymore. We're talking criminal charges, civil damages, and a lawsuit against the HOA for failing to control their president." Barbara just handed us the nuclear option. "Good," I said, surprising myself with my own vehemence, "because I'm done being nice. She wants a war? She's got one?" Emma tugged my sleeve. "Mom, are we going to lose our house?" I pulled her close. "No, baby, we're not going to lose anything. But Barbara, she's about to lose everything." David put his arm around both of us. "What's the next step?" I looked at the destroyed gnomes, at the threatening note still sitting in the evidence bag the police had left, at my daughter's tear-stained face, and felt something harden inside me. "We take her down," I said quietly. "Completely." And that's exactly what I did. But the next morning brought a twist I never saw coming, because when I checked my email at 6 a.m., there was a message from Jennifer Martinez, the community manager. "Karen, we need to talk. Immediately. Barbara has done something that affects everyone in this neighborhood, and you need to know about it before tomorrow's emergency board meeting. Call me as soon as you get this. And Karen, bring your lawyer. You're going to need him." What had Barbara done now? And why did Jennifer sound scared? I was about to find out that Barbara's obsession with my lawn decorations was just the tip of the iceberg, and the HOA board meeting tomorrow was going to expose secrets that would shake Meadowbrook Heights to its core. Did Barbara really commit vandalism on camera? What secrets is Jennifer hiding? Comment below what you think Barbara did that has everyone so worried. I called Jennifer Martinez back within 5 minutes of reading her cryptic email. My hands were shaking as I dialed, partly from the previous day's vandalism trauma, and partly from the ominous tone of her message. "Karen?" Jennifer answered on the first ring. "Thank you for calling back so quickly. We need to meet today. Not at the HOA office. Somewhere private." "What's going on?" Primera Asked. Your email said Barbara did something that affects everyone." "What does that mean?" She hesitated, and I heard papers rustling in the background. "I can't discuss this over the phone, but I've been the community manager for Meadowbrook Heights for 3 years, and I've never seen anything like this. Meet me at the Starbucks on Maple Street in 1 hour. Come alone, but have your lawyer on standby. She hung up before I could ask more questions. David was in the kitchen making breakfast when I came downstairs. Emma was still asleep, exhausted from yesterday's emotional trauma over her destroyed gnomes. "That was Jennifer Martinez," I said. "She wants to meet. She says Barbara's done something big, and I need to bring Robert." "Do you think it's a trap?" David asked, his protective instincts immediately activated. "I don't know." But she sounded genuinely scared, not angry or defensive. Scared. I called Robert Chun and explained the situation. He agreed to meet me at the Starbucks, billing it as an additional hour to our agreement. 55 minutes later, I walked into the coffee shop and found Jennifer sitting in the back corner, wearing oversized sunglasses despite being indoors. She had a laptop open and several manila folders stacked beside her coffee cup. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Is your lawyer here?" "He's parking," I confirmed. "Jennifer, what's going on?" "You're scaring me." She glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. "I'm about to lose my job. Probably face legal action, but I can't stay silent anymore. Barbara hasn't just been harassing you, Karen. She's been stealing from the entire neighborhood." My jaw dropped. "What?" Robert arrived at that moment, introducing himself and sitting beside me. Jennifer waited until he was settled, then opened her laptop and turned it toward us. "3 months ago," Jennifer began, "Barbara asked me to prepare financial reports for the HOA board meeting. Standard stuff. Maintenance costs, pool expenses, landscaping contracts, that kind of thing. But when I was compiling the data, I noticed discrepancies." She pulled up a spreadsheet showing HOA expenses for the past 18 months. Her finger traced down several highlighted rows. "These payments," she continued, "are all to a company called Meadowbrook Property Solutions. They supposedly provide landscaping, maintenance, and management services. Barbara insisted we use them exclusively. She said they offered the best rates." And Robert prompted, already taking notes. "Meadowbrook Property Solutions doesn't exist, at least not as a legitimate company." I did some digging. The business is registered to a shell corporation, and when I traced the ownership, it leads back to Barbara's husband, Richard Hendricks. They've been funneling HOA funds to their own fake company for the past 16 months. I felt like the air had been sucked from the room. "How much money are we talking about?" Jennifer's expression was grim. $137,000. Robert's pen stopped mid. "Say that again." $137,000, Jennifer repeated. "That's money that should have gone to actual contractors, actual services, actual maintenance. Instead, Barbara approved payments to her own company, signed checks as HOA president, and her husband cashed them." "But the neighborhood looks maintained," I said, confused. "The common areas are mowed. The pool works. She hired the cheapest contractors she could find and paid them cash under the table." Jennifer interrupted. "Probably undocumented workers who wouldn't question anything. Then she submitted invoices to the HOA for triple or quadruple the actual cost and kept the difference." Robert was already pulling out his phone. "This is embezzlement. Tissy's fraud. This is criminal." "It gets worse," Jennifer said quietly. 2 weeks ago, Barbara approached me privately. She told me she needed me to backdate some financial documents to cover a gap in the records. She offered me $5,000 to do it. "Did you?" I asked. "No." I refused. That's when she started getting aggressive with me, threatening my job, saying she'd spread rumors that I was in. Then she told me if I didn't cooperate, she'd make sure I was blamed for the missing money. "That's when you realized you needed to come forward," Robert said. Jennifer nodded. "I've been documenting everything. Every fake invoice, every suspicious payment, every threatening conversation. I have recordings, Karen. She doesn't know it, but I started recording our meetings after she threatened me. It's all here." She pushed a USB drive across the table. "This is copies of everything. The fake invoices, the bank statements I was able to access, the recordings, my personal notes, everything. Robert picked up the drive like it was made of gold. Jennifer, this is incredibly brave. But you understand you'll need to testify. You'll need to make official statements to the police and likely the state attorney's office. I know, she said, and I saw tears forming behind her sunglasses. I'm going to lose my job. The HOA will probably sue me for not reporting this sooner, but I can't let her steal from these families anymore. And after what she did to you, Karen destroying your property, threatening you, I realized she's dangerous. She won't stop. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you. I know this took courage. There's something else, Jennifer sighed, wiping her eyes. Tomorrow's emergency board meeting. Barbara called it because she wants to initiate foreclosure proceedings against you. She's been doctoring financial records to make it look like your HOA dues are 3 months overdue. She's forged your signature on documents. She wants to take your house. Karen, my blood ran cold. But I've paid every month. I have bank records. I know. She's creating false documentation. That's why I'm giving you this information now. You need to be prepared for tomorrow. Robert was already typing on his phone. Karen, I need to make some calls. We're going to the police with this today, right now, and we're filing an emergency motion to stop any foreclosure proceedings. We spent the next hour going through Jennifer's documentation. It was damning. Fake invoices with professional letterhead for a non-existent company, bank statements showing deposits into the Hendricks personal accounts. Email exchanges where Barbara explicitly instructed Jennifer to alter financial records. And most devastating, recordings of Barbara threatening Jennifer, bragging about how easy it was to manipulate the board, and discussing her plan to make an example of me. When we finally left the coffee shop, Robert had already contacted a detective he knew at the police department. We spent the rest of the afternoon at the police station, with Jennifer providing her statement and handing over all the evidence. Detective Sarah Morrison reviewed everything with the intensity of someone who'd just stumbled onto a major case. This is substantial, she said. We're talking multiple felonies here: embezzlement, fraud, forgery, and based on what happened to Mrs. Mitchell's property, vandalism, and criminal threatening. Will you arrest her? Primera, Asked. We'll need to coordinate with the district attorney's office, Detective Morrison explained. But yes, based on this evidence, I expect charges will be filed within 48 hours. The board meeting is tomorrow night, Robert interjected. Will that interfere with your investigation? Detective Morrison smiled slightly. Actually, a public meeting where she might incriminate herself further could be beneficial. But I'll have officers present, just in case things get heated. That evening, I sat with David and Emma at our kitchen table and explained what was happening. He kept it age-appropriate for Emma, focusing on the fact that Barbara had been breaking rules and would face consequences. So, she's not going to take our house? Emma asked, her voice small. No, baby, she can't take our house. We've done nothing wrong. And now everyone will know the truth. That night, I barely slept. I kept imagining the board meeting, wondering how Barbara would react when confronted with evidence of her crimes. Would she deny everything? Would she attack? Would she break down? The next day crawled by. I called in sick to work, unable to focus on anything except the evening's meeting. Robert came by at 3 p.m. to prepare. Here's the strategy, he said, spreading papers across our dining room table. The meeting starts with normal business. When they get to new business, that's when Barbara will try to bring up your supposed use violations. We'll let her present her fake evidence, then we'll systematically dismantle every claim. What about the embezzlement? I asked. We'll bring it up, but carefully. We'll present it as concerns about financial irregularities that need investigation. We can raise enough questions to force the board to take action. And Jennifer, she'll be there. She's prepared to resign officially and provide testimony about everything she witnessed. At 6:30 p.m., we arrived at the community center. Cars already filled the parking lot. Apparently, word had spread about the emergency meeting. and neighbors were curious. Barbara stood at the front of the room, talking to the board members. She wore a navy blue power suit and had her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked composed, professional, even confident. She saw me enter and smiled. Actually smiled. Then she raised her hand in a little wave, like we were old friends. The meeting began promptly at 7 p.m. Barbara called it to order with practiced efficiency, moving through standard reports quickly. Pool maintenance, landscaping updates, upcoming neighborhood events. Everything seemed normal. Then she got to new business. Item 7 on our agenda, Barbara announced, her voice taking on a somber tone. Delinquent accounts and enforcement procedures. I'm sorry to report that we have a homeowner who is currently 3 months behind on HOA dues, totaling $900 plus late fees. Despite multiple notices and opportunities to resolve this matter, the homeowner has refused to pay. She pulled out a folder and began distributing copies to the board members. This creates a serious precedent problem. If we allow one homeowner to ignore their financial obligations, it undermines the entire system. Therefore, I'm recommending we initiate foreclosure proceedings as permitted under our covenants. Patricia Walters, the secretary, looked uncomfortable. Barbara, foreclosure seems extreme. Have we tried working out a payment plan? Multiple times, Barbara lied smoothly. The homeowner has been uncooperative and hostile. She didn't say my name, but everyone knew who she meant. I felt dozens of eyes turned toward me. Robert stood up. May I address the board? Barbara's smile tightened. This isn't a homeowner forum. You can submit written comments. I'm Mrs. Mitchell's attorney, Robert said calmly, and I believe the board would want to hear relevant information before making such a serious decision. James Chun spoke up. I'd like to hear what he has to say. This seems rushed. Barbara's face flushed slightly, but she nodded. Fine. Be brief. Robert walked to the front, carrying his briefcase. Mrs. Mitchell is not behind on her dues. In fact, she has never missed a payment in 8 years. Here are bank records showing automatic payments made every month, including the past 3 months in question. He handed copies to each board member. Barbara's confident expression flickered. The documents President Hendricks is referencing are fraudulent, Robert continued. In fact, we have evidence that Mrs. Mitchell's signature was forged on several of these documents. That's a serious accusation, Gerald Thompson said, looking between Barbara and Robert. I wouldn't make it without proof. Robert pulled out more papers. These are the forged documents, and here's a forensic analysis comparing the signatures. They don't match. Barbara stood up, her voice sharp. This is absurd! Why would I forge anything? This is just a desperate attempt to avoid financial responsibility. Perhaps for the same reason you've been embezzling HOA funds for the past 16 months, Robert said quietly. The room erupted. Neighbors gasped, shouted questions, stood up from their chairs. Barbara's face went white, then red. How dare you! She shouted. This is slander. Gerald, I want him removed immediately. But Robert was already distributing more documents. These are invoices paid by the HOA to a company called Meadowbrook Property Solutions. Total payments, $137,000. The problem is, this company doesn't exist. It's a shell corporation owned by your husband, President Hendricks. You've been approving payments to your own fake company and pocketing the money. James Chun was flipping through the papers, his face growing darker. Barbara, is this true? Of course not. This is fabricated evidence from a disgruntled homeowner who we have testimony from your community manager. Robert interrupted. Jennifer Martinez has provided extensive documentation and recordings of conversations where you discuss this scheme. Jennifer stood up from where she'd been sitting in the back. She looked terrified but determined. It's all true. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. Barbara threatened me, tried to bribe me to cover it up. I have recordings. I have proof. Barbara's composure shattered. She slammed her hand on the table. You ungrateful little... This is mutiny. I've done everything for this community. I've maintained standards, enforced rules, kept property values high. By stealing from your neighbors? Patricia asked, looking horrified. Barbara, if this is true, it's not true. It's a conspiracy. They're trying to destroy me because I wouldn't let her keep those hideous lawn decorations. The absurdity of that statement hung in the air. $137,000 in embezzlement, and she was still focused on my garden gnomes. Detective Morrison, who'd been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. Senora Hendricks, I think you should stop talking. You have the right to remain silent. Barbara's eyes went wide. You can't. I'm the HOA president. You can't. The Meadowbrook Heights Police Department has been investigating allegations of embezzlement, fraud, and vandalism. Detective Morrison said calmly, based on the evidence we've reviewed, I need you to come with me for questioning. I'm not going anywhere, Barbara shouted. She raised both hands dramatically, like she could physically push away reality. This is my community. I built this. You can't do this to me. Two uniformed officers moved to either side of her. Ma'am, please, calm down. You can come voluntarily, or we can arrest you here. Your choice. For a moment, I thought Barbara might actually try to run. Her eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate. Then she seemed to deflate. Her hands dropped to her sides. I want my lawyer, she said quietly. Gerald Thompson stood up. I'm the HOA's attorney, Barbara. I can't represent you, personally. This is a conflict of interest. Her head snapped toward him. You're abandoning me. After everything you committed crimes using HOA resources, Gerald said, his voice hard. I represent the association, not you. And right now, the association is a victim of your actions. As the officers escorted Barbara toward the door, she stopped and turned back to look at me. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and then, impossibly, she laughed. A short, bitter sound. Over garden gnomes, she said, shaking her head. All of this, over garden gnomes. If you'd just followed the rules, Karen, if you'd just listened to me. They weren't real rules, I replied. They were your rules, and nobody has to follow those. She was still laughing as they led her out of the community center. The room exploded into chaos. Neighbors shouted questions at the remaining board members. James Chun tried to call for order. Patricia Walters was crying. Gerald Thompson was already on his phone, presumably calling his firm for guidance on the legal nightmare ahead. I sat down in my chair, suddenly exhausted. David squeezed my hand. Emma, who we'd left with the Patels, was safe and unaware of the drama. Robert leaned down and whispered, That went better than expected. Better? I asked. She was just arrested. Exactly, he said. And now the HOA has to deal with the financial mess she created, which means they'll be very motivated to settle any claims you might have. Your property was vandalized. You were harassed. Forged documents were created in your name, and you were threatened with foreclosure, all by the HOA president, acting in her official capacity. I looked at him. You think we should sue the I think the HOA will offer you a very generous settlement to avoid a lawsuit. Complete vindication, reimbursement of all legal fees, damages for emotional distress, and a formal apology. As I watched the chaos around me, I realized Robert was right. Barbara's downfall wasn't just her arrest. It was the exposure of everything she'd done, the destruction of her reputation, and the legal and financial consequences that would follow. But, Ibn Ten, I didn't know the full extent of what Barbara had done. Her arrest was just the beginning of a much larger scandal that would eventually involve state investigators, forensic accountants, and criminal charges against people I'd never even heard of. Tomorrow, I'd discover that Barbara's embezzlement scheme was just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, and that puzzle would lead me to secrets about Meadowbrook Heights that no one ever suspected. Barbara got arrested. But is the nightmare over? What are the secrets? Is Barbara hiding? Comment what you think happens next. The morning after Barbara's arrest, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The Meadowbrook Heights neighborhood chat had exploded overnight. Everyone wanted to know what happened. What can I what? And most importantly, how much money was actually missing from our community funds. But the call that changed everything came at 8:37 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Mitchell. This is Agent Rebecca Torres from the State Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you about Barbara Hendricks and the Meadowbrook Heights HOA investigation. How soon can you meet with me? State investigators. This was bigger than local police now. This was something much more serious than I'd imagined. My first thought was, Emma, what if this put our family in danger? What if Barbara's partners came after us? I met Agent Torres and her partner, Agent Michael Park, at a coffee shop 2 towns over. They wanted privacy, away from neighbors and media. Agent Torres was in her early 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with the bearing of someone who'd prosecuted complex cases. Agent Park looked younger, maybe 30, but carried himself with quiet confidence. Thank you for meeting us on short notice. Agent Torres began, sliding a business card across the table. We've been investigating HOA fraud in this county for the past 8 months. Your complaint about Barbara Hendricks connected directly to a much larger pattern we've been tracking. Larger pattern? I asked, my coffee forgotten. Agent Park opened a laptop and angled it so I could see. Mrs. Mitchell, what we're about to show you cannot be shared with anyone yet. This is an active federal investigation involving multiple HOAs, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and potentially dozens of people across several counties. My stomach dropped. Barbara wasn't working alone. Correct. Agent Torres said gravely, we believe Barbara was part of an organized fraud ring, systematically targeting HOAs across 3 counties. The scheme is quite sophisticated. They infiltrate HOA boards, usually by running for president or treasurer positions. Then they create professional-looking shell companies, submit entirely fake invoices, and systematically drain HOA accounts over months or even years. Agent Park turned his laptop screen toward me. On it was a complex network diagram showing connections between people, companies, and bank accounts. Lines connected names to businesses to financial institutions. At the center of it all was a name I didn't recognize. Marcus Webb. Who is that? I asked, pointing to the center. Marcus Webb is a financial consultant who specializes in HOA management systems. On paper, he helps communities manage their finances efficiently. In reality, he identifies vulnerable HOAs with weak financial oversight, recruits people like Barbara to take leadership positions, and orchestrates the entire fraud operation from behind the scenes. He takes a significant percentage of everything stolen as his coordination fee. How much money are we talking about in total? Agent Torres' expression was grim. Across all the HOAs we're currently investigating, nearly $2 million over the past 5 years. And those are just the cases we know about so far. There could be more. I felt dizzy. $2 million. Stolen from regular families, hard-working people just trying to maintain safe, pleasant neighborhoods for their children. Barbara alone took $137,000 from Meadowbrook Heights. Premeditated slowly. You're saying there are 8 or 9 more people like her doing the same thing. At least 9 other HOA presidents or treasurers in 3 counties that we've identified so far. Some took more money than Barbara. Some it took less. But they all used exactly the same playbook. Create fake companies with professional-looking invoices, inflate actual costs by triple or quadruple, pay cheap contractors in cash under the table, and use aggressive enforcement tactics to keep homeowners scared and compliant. That's why she went after me so aggressively. I realized the pieces clicking into place, not just because of the garden gnomes. She needed everyone in the neighborhood afraid to question her authority about anything. If people started pushing back, looking closely at the financial records, the whole fraudulent scheme collapses. Agent Park finished, nodding. Your refusal to back down, your meticulous documentation, your lawyer's investigation 8, cracked everything wide open. We've been building this case quietly for months, gathering evidence bit by bit. But we needed something concrete that would hold up in federal court. Jennifer Martinez's testimony and your security camera footage gave us exactly what we needed to move forward. Agent Torres leaned forward intently. Here's what happens next. In the coming days, Barbara will be formally charged with multiple federal felonies within 72 hours. But we urgently need her to cooperate with our broader investigation. If she gives us Marcus Webb and the others, if she testifies against them, she might get a significantly reduced sentence. If she refuses to cooperate, she's looking at 15 to 20 years in federal prison. Federal prison. I thought this was just a state case. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering across state lines. These shell companies moved money electronically between multiple states. That makes it federal jurisdiction. Barbara's in extremely serious trouble, Mrs. Mitchell. And so is everyone else involved in this criminal enterprise. I thought about Barbara's confident, smug face, her raised hand waving mockingly at me before meetings, her bitter laughter as police officers led her away in handcuffs. Do you honestly think she'll cooperate with you? Agent Torres smiled slightly, a knowing expression. People like Barbara always think they're the smartest person in any room. Until they suddenly realize they're not. Give her 48 hours sitting in a federal holding cell with a prosecutor carefully explaining her options. She'll talk. They always do. 2 days later, Agent Torres was proven absolutely right. Barbara, when faced with overwhelming evidence and the terrifying prospect of spending decades in federal prison, agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators. She gave them absolutely everything. Names, bank account numbers, email communications, secretly recorded meetings. She threw Marcus Webb and 8 other HOA presidents completely under the bus in a desperate attempt to save herself. The news hit our quiet suburban community like a devastating bomb. Local television stations covered the story extensively. State newspapers ran sensational headlines. Massive HOA fraud ring busted in Tri-County sweep. Even national news outlets picked it up as a shocking example of suburban white-collar crime systematically targeting ordinary American families. And suddenly, I was thrust unwillingly into the middle of an overwhelming media storm. Reporters with cameras and microphones camped outside my house, day and night. My phone rang constantly with aggressive interview requests from producers. Everyone wanted the exclusive story, the suburban mom who took down the HOA fraud ring. Garden gnomes lead to massive million-dollar bust. The headlines were absurd but the relentless attention was completely overwhelming for our family. David finally unplugged our doorbell after the 15th persistent knock from aggressive reporters in a single afternoon. Emma was genuinely confused and a little scared by all the cameras, strangers, and commotion. "Mom, are we in trouble? Did we do something wrong?" she asked one evening, peeking nervously through the curtains. "No, baby. We helped catch some very bad people who were stealing money from families, but the reporters will go away soon, I promise. They always move on to the next story." Robert Chun graciously became my official spokesperson, professionally handling all media requests and legal matters with impressive efficiency. Meanwhile, the HOA board, absolutely desperate to distance itself publicly from Barbara's crimes and avoid expensive lawsuits, offered a comprehensive settlement within just 1 week of her arrest. Gerald Thompson, the HOA's attorney, came to her house personally to present the offer. He looked utterly exhausted, like he hadn't slept properly in several days. His normally crisp suit was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Mrs. Mitchell, Mr. Mitchell," he began formally, sitting carefully in our living room with a thick folder of legal documents. "On behalf of the entire Meadowbrook Heights HOA board, I want to sincerely and unreservedly apologize for everything you and your family have endured. Barbara Hendricks grossly abused her position of trust, systematically violated your rights, and caused significant harm to you, your daughter, and your property. The board takes complete and full responsibility for failing to properly oversee your activities." He opened the bulging folder carefully. "We are prepared to offer the following comprehensive settlement package. First, A formal written apology to be posted prominently on the HOA website and physically mailed to every single resident. Second, full and complete reimbursement of all legal fees you've incurred defending yourself, currently totaling exactly $2,300. Third, a payment of $50,000 for emotional distress, property damage, and the sustained harassment you suffered. $50,000. A life-changing sum. I looked at David, who raised his eyebrows in genuine surprise. Additionally, Gerald continued carefully, we will formally amend the HOA covenants to explicitly allow lawn decorations and garden ornaments with your direct input on the specific language. We will also implement comprehensive new financial oversight procedures, require strict board term limits, and mandate independent external audits every single year going forward. What about the $137,000 Barbara actually stole from our community? I asked. The state has completely frozen all of the Hendricks assets pending criminal prosecution. We expect to recover most, if not all, of the stolen funds through asset forfeiture when Barbara is convicted. The HOA will use all recovered funds to directly repay affected residents through substantially reduced monthly dues over the next 3 years. Robert leaned forward intently. What about all the other residents Barbara harassed during her entire tenure as president? We are meticulously reviewing every single violation notice issued during Barbara's time as president. Any that appear even remotely questionable or improperly issued will be immediately voided, with all fines fully refunded. We're also establishing a formal review committee so residents can appeal any past decisions they believe were unjust or unfair. I thought about it very carefully. $50,000 would genuinely change our lives dramatically. David's struggling construction business could purchase desperately needed new equipment. Emma's college fund would receive a substantial boost. We could finally renovate our outdated, cramped kitchen. But more important than any money was the fundamental principle. I want one more thing added to this settlement. Primera sa, Id firmly. Name it, Gerald replied without any hesitation. A permanent memorial somewhere in the community park, specifically acknowledging what happened here and reminding all future boards that they exist solely to serve homeowners, not to enrich themselves. Maybe a memorial bench with a bronze plaque. Gerald smiled genuinely for the first time since arriving. I think that's an absolutely excellent idea. Mrs. Mitchell, we will definitely make it happen. We signed the comprehensive settlement agreement that very afternoon. 3 weeks after Barbara's dramatic arrest, Agent Torres called me again with another significant update. Mrs. Mitchell, I wanted to personally give you an update on how the case is progressing. Marcus Webb was arrested yesterday morning in Arizona while attempting to board a flight to Mexico. Barbara's detailed testimony was absolutely crucial to locating and apprehending him. We also arrested 6 other HOA presidents across 3 counties and 3 property management company executives who knowingly facilitated the fraud. Total criminal charges across all defendants now exceed 300 individual counts of fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. What happens to Barbara herself now? I asked. She will plead guilty to multiple federal felonies next month. In exchange for her extensive cooperation with our ongoing investigation, the prosecutor has agreed to recommend 8 years instead of the original 20 she was facing. She will serve at least 6 full years before becoming eligible for parole, and she will never be legally allowed to serve on any HOA board anywhere in the country again. 8 years in federal prison. Part of me felt deeply satisfied real justice had been served. Part of me felt genuinely sad. Barbara had completely destroyed her own life over simple greed and ego. Mrs. Mitchell, I also wanted to tell you something else that's important. Agent Torres continued. Because of your case, because of all the media coverage it generated, we've received credible tips about similar fraud schemes operating in 4 other states. Your courageous refusal to back down, your meticulous documentation, your willingness to stand up despite intimidation started something much bigger than you probably realize. You may very well have saved hundreds of families from similar devastating schemes. After Agent Torres hung up, I sat quietly on my front porch and looked thoughtfully at my garden. The beloved gnomes were gone, brutally smashed by Barbara in her rage. But the flower beds remained healthy and blooming. The birdbath still stood proudly. And now, finally, I could replace the gnomes without any fear whatsoever. David joined me moments later, handing me a fresh hot coffee. "What are you thinking about right now?" "About how this entire situation started simply because I wanted to put garden decorations in my own front yard. 7 simple ceramic gnomes, and Barbara somehow turned it into an all-out war, because she absolutely couldn't stand anyone challenging her authority in even the smallest way." "No," I said slowly, finally understanding it completely, because she was terrified. If I stood up to her over garden gnomes, other people might start standing up and asking questions about finances, about decisions, about transparency. She desperately needed total control and complete fear to keep her fraud hidden. Every violation notice, every threat, every fine, every act of harassment, it was all calculated to create an atmosphere of fear, so absolutely no one would dare look too closely at what she was actually doing with everyone's money. Well, someone finally did look closely enough. I smiled genuinely. Yeah, someone finally did. The next weekend, Emma and I went shopping together for new decorations. We visited 3 different garden centers before finding exactly what we wanted. 10 beautiful new garden gnomes to create an even better display. As we carefully arranged them in the front yard, neighbors spontaneously stopped by. The Johnsons brought beautiful fresh flowers. The Patels enthusiastically helped us plant colorful new petunias. Even people I'd barely spoken to before came by specifically to say thank you, to share their own stories of Barbara's harassment, and to celebrate her downfall together as a community. James Chun was unanimously elected as the new HOA president. His very first official act was formally presenting me with a beautiful framed resolution, thanking me for my courage and integrity. His second official act was installing the memorial bench we'd requested. It sat prominently in the community park, bronze plaque reading, "In recognition of all who courageously stand up for what's right. Even when it's difficult, may those who serve always remember they serve their neighbors, not themselves." 3 months after Barbara's arrest, I received an unexpected letter. Prison mail. I almost threw it away immediately, but curiosity won. The letter was handwritten in Barbara's distinctive script, though now it looked shaky and uncertain. "Karen, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know I'm genuinely sorry. Not just sorry I got caught, but truly sorry for what I did to you, to your family, to our entire neighborhood. I told myself constantly that I was maintaining standards, preserving property values, being a strong leader, but I was really just stealing and bullying innocent people to cover my crimes. Your garden gnomes didn't threaten our community at all. Primera did. I was the real threat. You were absolutely right to fight back. I hope someday Emma can forgive me for destroying her beloved gnomes. I hope our neighborhood recovers. I hope other HOA leaders learn from my terrible mistakes. You won, Karen. But more importantly, you were right. Barbara." I read it twice carefully, then folded it and placed it in my desk drawer. Did I forgive Barbara? I wasn't sure yet. Maybe, someday. But I genuinely appreciated that she finally understood what she'd done. That evening, as the sun set beautifully, I sat on my porch with David and Emma. Our garden gnomes stood cheerful guard. The neighborhood was peaceful, recovering. "Mum," Emma said, pointing to one gnome with a wheelbarrow, "can we name him Justice?" I laughed warmly. "Justice, the garden gnome. Perfect. Because he helped us get justice," Emma explained seriously. "He sure did, baby." As darkness fell gently, I reflected on everything. The threats, vandalism, stress, fear, but also triumph, community support, justice served, and knowing we'd helped protect hundreds, all because I refused to remove 7 garden gnomes. Sometimes standing up for small things leads to big changes. Sometimes refusing to back down exposes deep corruption. Sometimes seemingly ridiculous battles represent fundamental principles of fairness, justice, and the right to live peacefully in your own home. Barbara thought she could intimidate me. She thought her position gave unlimited power. She thought no one would challenge her. She was spectacularly wrong. Now she had 8 years to think about it. As for me, I had my home, family, gnomes, and satisfaction. That was worth more than any decoration. But the gnomes were pretty great too. 6 months after Barbara's sentencing, life in Meadowbrook Heights had finally returned to something resembling normal. The media circus was gone. The reporters had moved on. Our neighborhood was healing. But one November afternoon, I received a package that would change everything, one final time. It arrived by courier. No return address. Inside was a small metal lockbox and a handwritten note. Senora Mitchell, you don't know me, but I was Barbara Hendricks' housekeeper for 3 years. I quit the day she was arrested. Before I left, I found this hidden in her office behind a false panel. I think you should have it. I think everyone should know. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. I was scared, Maria. My hands shook as I opened the lockbox. Inside were documents, bank statements, ledgers, photographs, and a leather-bound journal. Barbara's journal. I called Robert Chun immediately. You need to see this now. An hour later, Robert sat at my dining table, reviewing everything. His expression darkened with each page. Karen, this is explosive. Barbara documented everything. Every payment, every threat, every scheme. And it goes back 7 years, not just 16 months. 7 years, I whispered. She was stealing before becoming president. Started as treasurer under Margaret Chun. Small amounts at first, but when she became president, she got greedy. Robert read from the journal, April 2024, that idiot Karen put garden gnomes in her yard. Tacky, but more importantly, she might question things. Can't have that. Need to shut her down before she looks at financials. Time to make an example. I felt sick. She targeted me specifically. Yes. And there's more. Entries about other homeowners. The Johnsons. The Pateles. Anyone who showed curiosity about finances got hit with violations. Robert showed me photographs. Other HOA presidents. Look at the back. Written in Barbara's hand. Marcus's recruit. Pinewood Estates. Potential. 300,000. She was recruiting for Marcus Webb, Robert said. Finding candidates for his fraud ring, getting finder's fees. How much did she really steal from us? Robert calculated quickly. Close to $350,000 over 7 years. The $137,000 was just what we caught recently. $350,000. We need Agent Torres immediately, Robert said. Agent Torres arrived within 2 hours. She examined everything carefully. This is a gold mine, she said. Barbara's plea deal was based on what she admitted. This shows she lied. Her cooperation agreement is void. What does that mean? Barbara goes back to court. Her 8-year sentence becomes 15 to 20. And with this journal naming names, we can prosecute 12 more people. Agent Torres looked at me with something like, "Oh, you're just exposed what might be the largest HOA fraud ring in state history." The next week, news broke. Barbara's sentencing was vacated. She was brought back to federal court. I attended the hearing. I wanted to see her face. Barbara looked smaller, diminished in her orange jumpsuit. When the judge announced 47 additional charges, her face went white. "Mrs. Hendricks," the judge said sternly, "you claimed you'd told investigators everything. This journal proves you lied under oath. You withheld evidence. You protected co-conspirators. Your cooperation agreement is revoked." "But Barbara started. "You are sentenced to 22 years in federal prison with no parole eligibility for 18 years. You will pay full restitution of $350,000, and you are permanently banned from any HOA leadership position." As guards led her away, Barbara looked at me. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Not anger, not smugness, pure terror. I felt no satisfaction, just sadness. She'd destroyed her life over greed. Using Barbara's journal, investigators arrested 12 more people. Marcus Webb's entire network was dismantled. Total recovered funds exceeded $3 million across all cases. The HOA amended our settlement, offering an additional $75,000. I accepted, insisting half be donated to a fund helping other communities investigate fraud. James Chun and the new board implemented sweeping reforms. Quarterly financial reports for every homeowner. Every board meeting recorded and posted online. Every expense over $500 required 3 board members' approval. Most importantly, they established an anonymous fraud reporting hotline. Other HOAs statewide adopted similar measures. A year after Barbara's final sentencing, I stood at the dedication of a second memorial in our community park, larger and more prominent than the first. The bronze plaque read, "In memory of trust betrayed and community restored." May we always remember that transparency prevents corruption, questions prevent fraud, and courage prevents injustice. Speak up, ask questions, hold leaders accountable. That is how we protect our homes. Emma stood beside me, now 11 years old. "Mom, are you glad it's finally over?" "Yes, baby, I am." "Was it worth it? All the stress and scary stuff?" I looked around our neighborhood. The Johnsons waved from across the park. The Patels were setting up for a community barbecue. James Chun was helping Mrs. Martinez carry chairs. People were laughing, talking, trusting each other again. "Yeah," I said with certainty, "it was worth it." That evening, David and I sat on our front porch as the sun set. Our garden gnomes 15 now. Emma kept adding morsted cheerful guard over our flower beds. "Do you ever regret not just removing them?" when Barbara first asked. David wondered. I thought about it. If I'd backed down, Barbara would still be stealing. The fraud ring would still be operating. Other families would still be losing money. "No," I said firmly, "I don't regret it for a second. Even with everything you went through, especially because of everything. Sometimes the right thing is hard. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for everyone. Sometimes 7 ceramic gnomes represent something much bigger than decorations." David smiled. "They represent the right to live peacefully without being bullied." Exactly, I thought about Barbara in her prison cell. 22 years. She'd be in her 70s when released, if she lived that long. Her husband had divorced her. Her friends had abandoned her. Her reputation was destroyed forever, all because she couldn't handle someone putting garden gnomes in their yard, because she underestimated someone who refused to be intimidated. The next morning, I watered my garden. "Justice," the gnome smiled up at me. Next to him stood Hope, Faith, Courage, and 11 others Emma had carefully named. Margaret Chun, who'd moved back from Florida after hearing about the scandal, walked over. "Karen, I wanted to apologize," she said. "I had Barbara as my treasurer for 2 years. I should have caught what she was doing. I should have looked closer at the finances. You trusted her to do her job honestly." But he made aside gently. "That's not a fault. Barbara was the problem." "I've been talking to other former HOA presidents," Margaret said. "We're creating a best practices guide for financial oversight, making sure this never happens again anywhere. Would you help us?" I smiled genuinely. I'd be honored. Over the next year, that guide became a model adopted by HOAs nationwide. Simple, common-sense measures, dual signatures. On large checks, mandatory external audits, board term limits, regular financial transparency reports, anonymous fraud hotlines, basic safeguards that, if properly in place, would have prevented Barbara's crimes entirely. Sometimes I still got recognized in public. "Aren't you the garden gnome lady?" people would ask. I'd smile and nod. That's what I'd become known as, the garden gnome lady who took down a fraud ring. I could think of worse legacies. 3 years after it all began, I received one final letter from Barbara, much shorter this time, just a few sentences in shaky handwriting. "Karen, I have 18 more years here. Plenty of time to think about what I did. You were right about everything. I was wrong about everything. I'm sorry. I hope someday I can be half as brave as you were, Barbara. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in my desk drawer with the first letter. Did I forgive Barbara? I wasn't sure yet. Maybe someday, but I appreciated that she finally understood what she'd done. What mattered more was what we'd built from the wreckage. A stronger community, better protections, widespread awareness that fraud can happen anywhere, and speaking up matters, and my beloved garden gnomes. Of course, 20 of them. Now, Emma had really gotten into collecting them. They stood in cheerful rows, guardians of our home and symbols of the battle we'd won. Not just a battle over lawn decorations, but a battle for honesty, integrity, and the right to question authority without fear. People sometimes ask if I'd do it all again, knowing everything that would happen, the threats, the vandalism, the stress, the fear. I always give the same answer without hesitation. Yes, absolutely, yes. Because some fights are worth fighting, some principles are worth defending, some garden gnomes are worth going to war over. Not because they're just decorations, but because they represent everything that truly matters. Home, family, freedom, justice, and the courage to stand up and say no when someone tries to take those things away. Barbara thought she could intimidate me into submission. She thought her position gave her unlimited power. She thought no one would dare challenge her. She was wrong on all counts. And now she had 22 years in federal prison to think about where she went wrong. As for me, I had my home, my family, my garden gnomes, and the satisfaction of knowing that when it mattered most, I stood up for what was right. That was worth more than any lawn decoration, but the gnomes were still pretty great too. And because I refused to back down, hundreds of families were saved from similar fraud. A criminal network was completely dismantled, and communities across the country became safer. All because of 7 ceramic garden gnomes standing in my front yard. That simple fact makes me smile every single time I look at them. The end. Thank you for following this incredible journey. Karen's courage changed everything and exposed massive fraud. What's your biggest takeaway from this story? Comment below and subscribe for more amazing true stories like this one.